Hi, everyone. Add to what just Martin said, ViGo is not only oil and gas company, it's a company that looks across the whole energy board, and we've looked in a number of renewable sources. We've positioned ourselves to source feedstocks from Asia. We work directly with our suppliers to ensure the traceability and eligibility of the products. We also intervene in the market for sustainable aviation fuel, for bunkering. But what definitely something I see the company believes in is BioLNG. We see it that we have production assets both in Europe and in the US, and we've heavily invested in distribution stations in 4 countries in Europe, and definitely we're looking to expand. So for us, I think this is a clear signal that we believe in this product, and it's here to stay. So we thought that it would be interesting for you to understand how it comes about in Europe, or what motivated this product to kind of show up all of a sudden. So the main driver is the Renewable Energy Directive. So unlike my predecessors, I'm a bit short on slides because in ViGo we are very lean and we don't usually do presentations. But for you, I try to put a little bit the highlights and I'll talk you through. So the Renewable Energy Directive has been now in Europe more than 15 years, and basically sets targets for renewable energy in the whole Union. And it has a specific target on transport. However, the European Union is one thing, and then you have all the member states. So it's a little bit, everyone still does whatever they want, or whatever is relevant for their own country. As such, we can see differences in the way the Renewable Energy Directive is implemented on a local level. So how the directive has evolved. It started first in 2003 with the first directive on biofuels. It was more of a voluntary legislation of sorts that put a target of 2% biofuels to be blended in the diesel and gasoline pool. This evolved in what we now know as the Renewable Energy Directive in 2010, placing 10% renewable energy in the gasoline and diesel pool. As you can see, I keep saying gasoline and diesel. So nobody was really thinking about gaseous fuels at that time. However, gradually things evolved, and particularly with Germany, they were among the first to recognize that even the fossil LNG, to an extent, reduces CO2 emissions. And they were providing government incentives for suppliers who distribute this type of fuel. Eventually, they stopped that, but this still started paving the way for LNG to enter the German market, and eventually for BioLNG. What's also very interesting about Germany is that unlike the directive, which places targets on energy, so how much percentage of the total energy pool will be in transport, renewable, in Germany we talk about greenhouse gas emissions. Because we are trying to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in Germany, therefore fuels which are with better greenhouse gas emission savings, they go to that market. Also, Germany puts very high penalties on suppliers who don't deliver renewable energy. As a result, we have all the incentives in the world to go to Germany and bring the best savings to that market. So when you look at the statements that we issue to German customers or lifting the fuel from Germany, those declarations will very often focus on manure, because manure, or not very often, 100% manure, because that feedstock succeeds to generate more than, it basically delivers minus, so negative greenhouse gas emission reductions, which is really, really great and competitive compared to other renewable alternatives. Then we have and there is no obligation on the LNG supply still. That may change in the next years as the legislation is evolving, but at the current state, only gasoline and diesel are obligated. That's not the case in other countries. For example, Belgium. In Belgium, even if you're supplying LNG, you have to then mandatory deliver also a sustainable alternative. So you have an obligation and you have an incentive to green your supply. They, on the other hand, then don't focus on greenhouse gas emissions, they focus on energy content. As such, I don't have the incentive as a supplier to bring my best savings to the Belgian market, so I'll deliver other feedstocks based BioLNG. For example, have you heard of wastewater from enzyme processing, or maybe food waste, or any other product that eventually delivers something like 14 grams of total CO2 emissions, still quite competitive, very similar to what HVO will deliver, but overall not as good as manure, and that's because of the Belgium incentive. And then we have Netherlands, which I put in the middle. They're a little bit more restrictive than the other two markets because they do not recognize biomethane transported via the European grid as sustainable, even though it carries all the certifications. As such, it's difficult to deliver that product at a very competitive price to the Dutch market, and we don't see a big interest or possibilities at the moment. However, next year, we expect that the Dutch switch also to greenhouse gas mandate, and therefore the product that we deliver today to Germany would be also potentially interesting for the Dutch market. So for us, it's very important, this renewable energy directive, because it kind of really directs or gives incentives on where we can position our renewable stations, which are the member states that gives the best incentives and most recognition to the products we have access to. The other thing I wanted to mention is that this renewable energy directive is part of what the European Union refers to Fit for 55, basically the objective of the European Union to reduce their emissions by 55% by 2030. And as part of this package, there are a number of legislative documents which try to achieve that. And some of them are focused on, particularly on aviation and on marine. So why I'm mentioning that? Because these three countries, what they have in common is that they are by the sea. So they have big bunkering operations or access basically to seagoing vessels. They also have, particularly Netherlands and Germany, big airports with a lot of jet fuel consumption. So as part of the current version of the Renewable Energy Directive, they put the obligation not just on road transport, which was until recently, but also on the other modes of transport. And the targets are quite ambitious. 29% in energy content needs to be renewable by 2030 in the whole of the European Union. However, this includes aviation and marine. And how much you can demand the renewability in marine and aviation is limited between 2 to 3%. So the big chunk of renewability will come from the transport sector. So we will see a lot of focus in policy in bringing renewable energy to the road transport market in the coming, what is now 5 years, 4 to 5 years. So the second topic I'll touch upon is certification. So as part of the Renewable Energy Directive, it's important what we deliver to the market as biofuel, it's really sustainable. So how this is shaped? In the legislation, they put minimum requirements around traceability, use of different chain of custodies, which feedstocks are sustainable, because very often we talk about crops and as a non-sustainable feedstock. That's not true. If we focus on the Renewable Energy Directive requirements, anything that meets their certification requirements is considered sustainable, whether it's palm, whether it's rapeseed, whether it's used cooking oil, manure. As long as it's certified according to the European law, that's sustainable material. The fact that someone allegedly may have done fraud, then there are other institutions who need to focus on that. But the documentation proves that the product is sustainable. So when we talk about the certification, it's quite important in the context of the RED, and maybe you are familiar with the ICC EU, which is one of the most popular certification schemes. They focus on certifying the full supply chain. So if we look at the BioLNG, apologies, just realized that microphone was far from my mouth. We start with certifying the feedstock. So in our instances, these are organic waste and different types of manure. We have the wet and dry manure, it's not just liquid. So how this works, basically we work with farmers directly for the assets that we own, or that's the same thing that our suppliers will also do. You work directly with farmers. Annually, someone goes and checks the biggest farms, make sure that indeed there is manure there, and that they're not tricking us in some way, that the administrative records are in place, and all is good. Then we have biogas and biomethane facilities that buy this organic material and do the anaerobic digestion. So this facility is also annually reviewed by an external auditor. And so this external auditor checks incoming and outgoing material in the plant, but they also check the greenhouse gas calculation methodology that was applied and whether all the emissions are in fact correctly used. And then we have the liquefaction and eventually transportation to the fueling station. So why we have the two colorings? Because where we have the dark green, that's where the supply chain is fully certified and covered. That's what falls under the scope of the Renewable Energy Directive. Distribution stations, they are the outlet, but from a legal perspective, they don't fall directly under the legislation. This doesn't mean the product is not sustainable or anything like that. Still, the entity that is buying the product from the green side, they're buying sustainable product. It's just a little bit of a administrative, maybe discrepancy of sort, but they're buying sustainable product, which is proven through invoices and other documentation. And for us as ViGo, as we own the whole supply chain basically, we are very active in sourcing the manure in the biogas facility. We also, in terms of injecting the product into the grid, we have a huge gas desk that oversees also that all the administration that needs to follow in the gas grid is correctly done. And then, of course, we oversee the transportation and the ViGo side on fueling your trucks. What we found as we've been working on this is that for customers, it's important to have some form of statement and validation that indeed the product that they bought is bio and it reduces their emissions. And it basically came from you, from the customers, the idea about a ViGo sustainability statement, which it's a self-statement basis the purchases that ViGo does from ViGo, a fully certified supplier. And it's been ongoingly adjusted based on your requirements. So in general, don't be shy to ask us questions or if some needs of yours emerge as part of this process, because this is a developing area. And what we expect is that in the next years, probably standards that focus specifically on the site of the distribution station also develops as we see that more and more customers are asking for maybe a third-party audit or some form of an external validation that what we are indeed selling is as per the documents. Today, however, there is no standard, at least in Germany and Benelux. We have something similar in the UK currently happening. And what ViGo has been doing is trying to adhere to these already established rules and guidelines. So to ensure that our customers indeed could make credible claims, we make sure that our supply chain, we know where we are buying from. And as it was mentioned previously in presentations, it's very easy with BioLNG as everything is in Europe and we know exactly where it's coming from. So from that perspective, when we make a claim on behalf of ViGo, we are very confident that what we are saying is true. And finally, this is the ViGo statement, which we develop, I like to say, jointly with you, because it bases your feedback. And we notice often that there are two sections that cause most of the questions. So I'm very happy that the colleagues before me explained some of the items. So the first one is around the greenhouse gas intensity that basically the fuel generates for every energy unit. This again, as European directives, they work in energy units. That's where this comes from. So the industry kind of adjusts to it. But we were also asked by you to express how much this saves for every ton of fuel that you consume, and that's why we placed it there. The metrics are quite easy, and if someone has a specific question how to do it, we can help you with that. Then energy content, there is a standard value provided by European authorities, which is like for every kilogram of BioLNG or LNG, we have 50 megajoules of energy. So we just multiply the kilos by 50. Then in terms of country production, this refers to the production of the BioLNG. So it's more about where the liquefaction took place. While when we talk about country of origin, that's the origin of the feedstock. So in the case of manure, is it from Spain, is it from Ukraine? But it will always be within the European scope. Then feedstock details. We indicate for German customers manure, because we know for sure 100% of everything we deliver to the market is from manure. But for other markets, like Netherlands and Belgium, you can see other items. In general, my preference is to indicate that this is just waste-based product, because you have a really big variety of wastes. And I personally, that's my opinion, and happy to be proven wrong, I don't think anyone cares about wastewater from enzymes or other similar type of wastes. So for this reason, for simplicity, we indicate waste-based product. And then the other items, traceability. This refers to the requirements of the Renewable Energy Directive, which is under the so-called mass balance. And supply chain certification, this refers to the certification of ViGo. So ViGo is the seller of the sustainable product to ViGo. So every time you see a number here, that's the ViGo group number, and that's the stamp basically, or the guarantee that the product you buy is really sustainable. So here are some examples. So the greenhouse gas intensity, it's a computation of a number of different types of emissions. It was mentioned earlier that there is a tendency to move towards full life cycle emissions, not just focus on the tailpipe. And that's how the Renewable Energy Directive was designed already in 2010. Now in the cases of the current discussions around trucks, people are just waking up to that idea. But in Europe, in other directorates of the Commission, that idea was already there. We see that also in marine, for example, if you follow the International Maritime Organization, initially their decarbonization indexes, they were focusing as well on tailpipe. But the current measures proposed by the organization, they also look at full life cycle, and that's why they refer to net zero and near zero type of fuels, because they recognize that they cannot rely only on ammonia, hydrogen, and others. The future is a mix of fuels, and it takes time to reach the net zero. So we need to rely on everything available. If you're curious about water emission, the emissions or this EEE everywhere, so the first one is extraction and cultivation. So typically for the products we deliver to any of the Benelux and Germany markets, that value will be 0. And then we have EL for when we have land use change, P is for processing, TD for transport distribution, U for usage, so this potentially could be the tailpipe emissions if for biofuels they're 0, but for fossil there'll be something else. Then we have the SEA, which is related to improvements in the agricultural practices. So in our instance here, for manure, you normally see something like 111, because basically these are savings from the fact that we take the manure from the slurries, and those emissions are basically contained. They're not going into the atmosphere, so we're directly saving emissions from going into the air. And then we have carbon storage and sequestration type of emissions, which further could improve the profile of the fuel. So when ViGo receives their documents for the BioLNG they procure, we receive hundreds. Like, we can receive a document for almost every kilogram of fuel. So what we do afterwards, we aggregate these numbers to simplify the process. In general, all the manure delivers at least minus 90 grams of CO2. For some customers who are more conscious or have higher requirements, we provide even better than this value. But everything is processed on ViGo sites to ensure that the documentations reflect reality. So we normally guarantee at least minus 90 grams for Germany. Yeah. And then very often we are asked, okay, Mila, how is it possible that you have minus emissions? on a product. And that's very unique to BioLNG. It's possible because of these practices that I just mentioned, where basically we save from those emissions going into the atmosphere, we get them into the anaerobic digestion, and that's how the European legislation rewards the biomethane production. And this little picture that you see here on the screen is extracted directly from the Renewable Energy Directive. Depending on the production or the type of anaerobic digestion, they give different rewards. In the majority of cases we work with, we get this type of reward because we have closed digistats. So that's how it works. Any questions, please let me know.
Hello, my name is Sabrina Schulz. I'm from DKME Mobility, and my question is, this is the certificate that your customer is receiving, right? But it's not the same certificate as ViGo is using for their own GHG quota, right?
No, okay, that's a good question. So the THG quota is what we refer in our industry as a ticket. So the tickets, they basically are issued by the local government, in this instance Germany, but there are equivalent types of tickets in Belgium and the Netherlands. So they're issued, in our instance, to ViTo. So because ViTo is the one that falls on the slide I showed you earlier, that falls under the obligation or delivers the biogenic fuel because they fulfill the requirements of the law. So the documents that ViTo receives, they give them to the German government, and basis that, the government issues us the THG quota, which we after that trade. So this whole process is overseen by third-party auditors, and we undergo rigorous audits every time. But yes, they're different, and because we fall under this obligation, we are not allowed anymore to pass those documentations to other actors in the supply chain. So we've been asked by some customers, oh, can you issue an ICC POS to us? And the answer is no, because ICC is designed to fulfill the obligations under RED. It's not designed for these voluntary, what we refer as voluntary claims. And if we do that, we risk non-compliance and basically for us to get into trouble. We don't want that. So the documents are for government purposes, but basis these documents, we are allowed to demonstrate to those who uptake the product that indeed we bought BioLNG, that this product arrived at the market, and so on. I believe that this will change. Also, there was a lot of resistance in the past that they were even questioning, are we even allowed to issue any kind of documents like that, because there was a risk of potentially double counting. But now, especially in the context when we get aviation and marine on board, you see that both suppliers and customers want to make claims that they're reducing emissions. And we go to the authorities and say, well, you count the emissions of diesel twice, once for the supplier and once for the consumer. What's the difference with bio? And now they are accepting these arguments, and we are able to give with confidence this. So I hope that I think we as an industry, now that we more or less we have set up on how this statement works, we could potentially set up a standard that is recognized also for the consumption side, but is not there yet. So it's evolving.
We were discussing with a client of ours the reduction percentage, and they are very, of course, I understand why the BioLNG is a very good product. Mm-hmm. Because the CO2 reduction is higher than any other source. But the customers, they are hesitant to accept that. Is that going to change with the new rules on RED 3?
So there are two elements. One is the supplier, the other one is the consumer. On the supplier side, there is no problem. The emissions are valid. They're under the Renewable Energy Directive. However, there is a little bit of a discrepancy between what the Commission does on the supplier side versus what the European Commission does on the consumer side. As we discussed earlier, today all standards are on tailpipe emissions for when we speak about trucks. And often because of that, these negative emissions are not fully recognized or seen as needed. We have customers who don't care about these negative emissions, and for them we revise the statements and remove those emissions from the statements. But they are in the law. If a customer is doubting the emissions, you can refer them to the Renewable Energy Directive Annex 5. You have everything there. This little table is from there. So if it's in the European law, I think it should be all right, right? It's as credible as it could be, I suppose. It's my answer. I do expect that eventually also on the truck side, things will change, and this will be recognized. And potentially, maybe you will have to have 2 reporting lines where on the second one you need to indicate where these negative emissions come from, and then you can indicate due to better agricultural practices or something like that. We ourselves also have been asked to do that separation by some of our customers. But it's a difficult question, and to be honest with you, I also see it on the marine side. So when we do bunkering operations of BioLNG, customers and also auditors on the marine side ask, because they've never seen that before. So we have these conversations with them, and we're happy to support you. If you have a difficult conversation with the customer on this subject, we can work with you to help you.